patiently waited for justice for decades.
Well, of course, Desiree, as you can see, the family of Timol, they are just on standby to give us their reaction. And, of course, other organizations I can see that have been fighting tooth and nail in this particular case. But let's just get reaction from Imtiaz Kaji, his Timol's nephew. Imtiaz, thanks so much for your time. Your first reaction after that particular judgment, please.
Totally excited, truly humbled that we had always known that the truth will be on our side. And today's judgment is not just a victory for Ahmed Timol, but for all the other activists who've died in police detention. In 25 years since the birth of democracy, there's been absolutely no progress on their investigations. And there's a clear message that the full bench has sent today, that apartheid-era perpetrators can no longer use the excuse of the time delay, or like Rodrigues did, talking about his age, and that will simply not hold. And I think we are totally delighted. And I think first and foremost to thank our legal teams, thank the Foundation for Human Rights, Howard Vani, Ty Scott, Moray Hawthorne from Weber Wenzels, and then the amicus applicants, the South African Litigation Centre, the Law Society, the lawyers representing the TRC commissioners, and the Pan-African Bar Association of South Africa. So obviously we need to study the judgment much more closely, but I think the message was very clear that the criminal case against Joao Rodrigues must commence immediately.
I mean, you kept on saying he was actually using delay tactics to keep on dragging this particular case. Are you satisfied now that there's this judgment which is now in your favor as well as other families' favor, sir?
Absolutely. The judge was very clear, and Judge Motley emphasized this point, when the inquest commenced on the 26th of June 2017. That this particular matter, the reopening of the Ahmed Timol matter, is going to open a very, very painful wound. A very painful wound that we cannot ignore. We cannot simply just discard in a democratic South Africa. And the message is very clear that the Minister of Justice, newly appointed Minister of Justice, the new head of the NDPP, need to, with immediate urgency, start prioritizing TRC cases. We cannot simply continue dragging and delaying their feet, and as victims' families continue begging. 25 years have passed. Victims' families, members have passed on. The Matthew Mabelane family have lost their father last year. During the first week of the court proceedings on the 26th of June, Judge Bele Motley, specifically in chambers, asked the NPA team to fast-track the investigation of the killing of Matthew Mabelane. And more than 2 years later, absolutely no progress has transpired.
I mean, you kept on saying that Rodrigues appears to keep on sticking to that particular version of events, saying that Timol took his own life. This time around, do you feel that he might change his statement? I mean, he's going on to trial now. Do you expect anything different from what he said in the 1972 inquest as well as the 2017 inquest, which overturned the suicide version?
We've been very consistent, Maheketla. We've continuously reached out to him, and we'll continually to do so even after the judgment today. But if he continues to stick to his version of events, then let the criminal case unfold. Let the court of law find their own rulings in 2019 as to what transpired. But as victims' families, we cannot continue going on like this, where these matters continuously gets delayed. And like I said, look at the timeline. The matter was brought to the attention of the NPA in the beginning of 2016. Not just the Timor matter, but also the death in detention of Dr. Neil Aggett. And it's only a month ago that the NPA has announced the reopening of the inquest into the death in detention of Dr. Neil Aggett. So these matters need urgent priority, and the Minister of Justice has got to prioritize the reopening of TRC cases. And if apartheid-era perpetrators continue to stick to their version of events that was supported by the judiciary in open collusion with the security branch during the apartheid era, then he must face the full wrath of the law.
Thanks so much. Let's just bring you in here. I know that you were involved in the 1996 TRC Commission. What does this judgment mean for you as former commissioner in the TRC Commission?
This judgment is historic for the work of the Truth Commission because in 1999 we handed over a list of 300 cases to the then head of the Scorpions, Bulelani Nuka, and in fact we asked that these cases be further investigated with a view to prosecutions. It took us until 2005 to get prosecution guidelines from the NPA, and of course it's been a 16-year battle to get the first inquest reopened. So this judgment really is a victory, as the judge put it, for justice and accountability for victims. The judge also said that there's a new criteria that they are using, and that is the interests of the victims and their families and our society. And so I would say that another thing that the judge said was that the NDPP needs to take account of the officials who were in fact implicated in the delay, because they don't hold only the state accountable for the political interference. And so she and the Minister of Justice needs to take action against those involved. But I think the message to the perpetrators really from our side is that this judgment is a message to you. Come forward and make full disclosure, because if you don't, we're going to be relentless in our pursuit for justice and accountability. And the message is to the NDPP as well. Do your job without fear or favor, because at the end of the day, this matter is a signal to you and to all of the other cases that we're coming after the perpetrators.
I mean, you talk about coming forward and give disclosure, and I know that I once spoke to you. You said that Rodrigues himself refused to come and appear before the TRC Commission.
Yes, he refused to come. He was approached, and in fact for many years we believed that he was not alive, and it was really only until his daughter in fact disclosed that he was alive and that he was well, and that in fact that is how we were able to trace him, so that finally he could be indicted. I think we also need to remember that Judge Billy Motley also ruled that there were two other security branch officials, Else and Sons, and they have not yet been indicted. And I think that's a challenge to the NPA. Why have you not brought charges against him yet? So we hope for Mr. Rodrigues' sake that in fact this time he's going to change his story. But I think at the end of the day, justice will prevail.
Thanks so much for your time. We highly appreciate your time indeed. And I have to put it on record that we were expecting to get some reaction from the NPA. Okay, here she is, Pindim Jonathan. Thanks so much for your time. Just shortly, briefly, your reaction as NPA in this case.
Well, firstly, the ruling affirms the rule of law. And it is in the interest of justice, as the court ruled. It is both in the interest of justice and that of society that those who are alleged to have perpetrated violent crimes should be held accountable, should be brought to court and be held accountable for their actions.
But Pindi, then there are a lot of complaints here. What is NPA doing about the other cases? I mean, we are told that it was up to you to actually take up these particular cases.
Look, for now in Gauteng, we have the case of Simelane and the one of Agachi, if I'm calling the surname correctly. But a whole lot of investigations are happening on the background, and all these matters are handled from the office of the National Director, obviously going down to the offices of the various directors of public prosecutions. So there is work happening, so we will just like to plead with the public to bear with us, seeing that there is a whole lot of work that is happening on the background.
Just to sum it up, in this Rodrigues case, he is charged with premeditated murder, culpable homicide. Can you just clarify those charges for us, and when can we expect the trial to start?
Well, Mr. Rodrigues is charged with premeditated murder because it is Section 51(1) of the Criminal Procedure Act, and also defeating the ends of justice. So he faces 2 counts, one of premeditated murder and one of defeating the ends of justice. And I didn't get your second question, Maheketla.
The second question, when can we expect this trial to start?
Well, we don't want to preempt what will happen as the NPA because the word that we had currently from the lawyers that were representing him is that they want to study the judgment and then they'll inform us whether they wish to appeal or not. But obviously if they appeal, then we cannot go to trial. We need to first exhaust that process and then we can be able to set the trial date.
Thanks so much for your time. And of course, that's Pindim Jonodwani from NPA in Gauteng, clarifying those issues for us. But I can tell you that this is an unprecedented case. The first ex-cop from the apartheid regime to stand trial in a 25-year-old democracy in South Africa. So we will just actually wait and see when this particular trial is expected to start. At this stage, from the defense side or Rodrigues' lawyers, we're not really quite sure where to from here. We understand that he still has an option to appeal this particular judgment. It's likely that this particular case might as well go to Bloemfontein for the Supreme Court of Appeal. Back to you in studio for now.
Makeketla, what's the mood like in court?
Well, I mean, you saw some jubilation, of course, more especially from the family of Timor, clearly showing that this is a huge victory for them. And as he mentioned, Imtiaz, that this is not only a victory for Timor's families, also a victory for other families that are still asking the question, what happened to our loved ones? Many of those families, of course, did not even get the opportunity to receive the bodies of their loved ones back then. And of course, they're still asking the question, how can we get to understand what happened to our loved ones? Obviously, this particular case cracks open the opportunities for these particular families to go ahead and then approach courts in order for them to get assisted and get closure in terms of what happened to their loved ones. And let's not forget that some of the organizations like Kulumani Group support group did mention that there is a lot of cases of file sitting on the shelves and waiting to be prosecuted. And obviously this particular case has actually cracked open that particular opportunity for them.
Thank you so much for bringing us that outcome live. Makeketla Mhlabe, the Joao Rodrigues will have to face the music, as it were.